rain was falling, soft but steady, when they cuffed the black man. His mother's blood dripped from her forehead onto his wrists, right where the steel of the handcuffs bit into his skin. The ambulance hadn't arrived, but the squad car had. And the first question wasn't, "Is anyone hurt?" It was, "Who was driving the old car?" That afternoon in Garrison, a town where justice was often written in glances, not laws, a crash unfolded at an unmarked intersection. No traffic light, no camera, just a mother slumped over the wheel and a son arrested while calling for help. The charge? Reckless endangerment. The evidence? There was none, only a skin color, and a system that had long since learned how to judge first and ask later, or not at all. Garrison was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, but not well enough to defend each other. Tucked among dry wheat fields in southern Georgia, it flew the American flag all year long, but the flag in people's hearts had long since torn and faded. No traffic lights at the town's busiest crossroad, just a weathered yield sign, crumbling pavement, and prejudices that were slicker than any rain-slicked road. On the west side of town, where white families lived in clean brick homes, kids were taught to honk and go. On the east side, where black families lived in water-stained apartments and played ball beneath sagging power lines, children learned to slow down, step back, and smile through the blame. That day it rained, not loud, just that kind of soft, unrelenting drizzle that wears down more than concrete. It blurred windshields, softened street signs, and soaked even the last threads of human patience. Derek Miles, 29, had just clocked out from his delivery shift when the call came. His mother, Alma, had collapsed at home with chest pain. No ambulance was available within 30 miles. He drove, fast but careful, still in his creased company rain jacket. No radio, no time to think, only the steady sound of raindrops on glass, ticking like a countdown. At Marigold Crossroad, he slowed to yield. He always did. But from the left came a white Lexus RX, no brakes, no warning, charging forward like guilt with a steering wheel. The crash didn't sound like in the movies. It wasn't dramatic, it was sharp, final, merciless. Derek's old Chevy spun sideways. The passenger side slammed a pole. His mother's head snapped forward. Blood streaked the window. He didn't scream. He climbed out, circled the car, fumbled for the seatbelt. "Mom! Mom, can you hear me? Open your eyes. Look at me, please." No answer, just rain. Just the coppery smell of blood, the acrid tang of burnt rubber, and the deafening pound of his own heart. The Lexus came to a clean stop, untouched except for a scratch along the side. The man who stepped out wore a white shirt, soaked now, with an undone collar and steady hands. Vincent Haynes, 41st, son of the wealthiest real estate developer in the region. He staggered slightly, but said nothing. He didn't check on anyone, just pulled out his phone. The ambulance arrived minutes later, but the EMTs were waved toward Vincent first to check for shock. No one ran to Alma. No one asked Derek what happened, until a young black nurse jumped out from the second vehicle. She spotted Alma, unconscious, bleeding, and shouted, "She's seizing! Where's the respiratory? We need oxygen now!" Moments later, the police pulled in. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped out. They didn't speak. One walked straight to Vincent, draped a jacket over his shoulders. The other approached Derek. "Hands behind your head. Do not resist. Please, my mom needs help." "We've been clear." No one asked who had the right of way. No one measured braking distance. No one checked the faded yield sign. Just one look, one quiet, familiar decision, as if the system had long been trained to recognize guilt by melanin alone. Derek was shoved into the cruiser. The door slammed shut. The rain kept falling. Across the street, Vincent sat on a stone ledge. A bottle of water was handed to him. He made a call. Another ambulance pulled in, but the only person in handcuffs was the one who called for help. The next morning, the official report, signed, stamped, and folded, was delivered to the Garrison District Court. It spanned just 4 tidy pages, but every sentence read like it had been pre-approved by muscle memory. Page 1, line 1, left nothing to the imagination. Suspect Derek Miles, male, 29, resident of East Garrison, was operating a vehicle in poor weather conditions and made a sudden maneuver that resulted in a collision. There was no diagram of the scene, no skid mark analysis, just Vincent Haynes's account. In the words consistent with responding officers' observations. No mention of Derek's mother, unconscious in the back seat. No word on the blood smeared across the window. No reference to the son who'd shouted for help in the rain. The one possible lifeline, a surveillance camera from Wesley's Mart, right across from the intersection, was ruled out in a footnote. Security footage unavailable between 12:40 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. due to network error. Curiously, the crash happened at 12:47. No inquiry into why that technical glitch occurred only once that entire month. No mention of how the inside cameras at the store still managed to capture customers checking out just fine. When asked, Vincent stated he had been on his way back to the office after lunch with a business associate. No one asked who that associate was. No receipts were requested. No timeline verified. This wasn't his first brush with chaos. He'd previously crashed into a streetlight at midnight and had once been accused of assault by a bartender. Both cases were settled privately before ever reaching a courtroom. But then again in Garrison, the Haynes family name appeared on the high school football stadium, the new real estate project downtown, and according to one courthouse clerk, the Bell family's holiday card list. Meanwhile, Derek sat in holding at the county detention center. No phone calls allowed. The reason? Ongoing investigation. Risk of information leak. When his court-appointed attorney tried to make contact to finalize representation, the detention staff simply responded, "His case is still in transfer. Legal access will be granted after judicial determination." 36 hours. 36 hours without knowing if his mother was still alive, without knowing who, if anyone, was even aware he'd been silenced. Monday morning. Emergency hearing. Garrison District Court. Judge Harold S. Bell took the bench, seated behind a worn wooden desk that bore a deep rectangular scratch. A mark, they said, from a gavel once thrown during a particularly disruptive trial. Bell was past 60, hunched slightly, high forehead, rimmed glasses, known for being tough on chaos. But in Garrison, people whispered, that toughness usually aimed one way. Derek entered in cuffs, wrists still sore beneath the metal. He stood alone, no attorney beside him, his face hollow from lack of sleep. His cheeks still bore the ghost of last night's rain. On his wrists, faint purple lines marked where the cuffs had sat too long. Only the police report was present, clean, neat, unchallenged. Judge Bell didn't look up for 2 full minutes, just skimmed the papers, cleared his throat, and asked, "You were cited for speeding in 2022, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. I paid the fine. But that, I'll decide what's relevant, Mr. Miles." There was no rebuttal, no suggestion of independent review, no witnesses called, no cross-examination, only silence and gravity. Then, without lifting his eyes from the file, Bell spoke. "Given the presented evidence and risk of recidivism, this court approves pretrial detention. Preliminary assessment, the defendant poses a high risk to public safety." Derek didn't fully grasp what it meant, but he understood enough. He wouldn't be going home. He wouldn't be seeing his mother, and he would not be presumed innocent. The courtroom lights flickered faintly. Dust floated near the narrow window, where one ray of afternoon sun crept through. That light landed quietly, insistently, on Derek's hand, the same hand still stained with his mother's dried blood. No one in the room asked, "How is the woman who bled?" Not a word, not a glance. Because in that room, the law had done what it always did in places like Garrison. It chose who was worth saving and who was easier to forget. They put Derek Miles in holding cell number 6, a windowless concrete box, 6 feet by 10, no clock, no daylight, just a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead and a rusted steel cot with one bent leg. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He simply turned to the guard escorting him and asked, "Can I ask, do you know how my mother's doing?" The man didn't stop walking, didn't even glance back. The cell door closed with a heavy metallic clunk. No answer. no promise. Outside, Garrison moved on like nothing ever happened. The morning cafe brewed its usual coffee. The town paper landed on porches with stories about high school football scores and a local pastor's daughter marrying a young lawyer from Atlanta. No headlines about the crash, no mention of a black man being detained, no word about a woman still in critical care. Across from the intersection at Wesley's Mart, the store whose camera malfunctioned, there was no effort to repair it. Wesley, the store's Italian owner in his 60s, used to drink with Vincent Haynes' father. When asked, he just shrugged, poured more coffee, and muttered, "Cameras break." This ain't a movie. Tiana, the young ER nurse who had screamed for help when she saw Alma Miles seizing on the stretcher, she had planned to submit a report, to say something. But when she showed up for her next shift on Tuesday, she'd been reassigned to the supply room. No explanation, no warning. A doctor from her unit pulled her aside, voice low. "Tiana, I know you've got a conscience, but Garrison's not the kind of place where the truth gets you far. Around here, doing what's right can look an awful lot like betrayal." She said nothing, but from that day on, she began documenting everything. Tiny notes scribbled in a notebook tucked deep in a basement drawer, hidden between latex gloves and alcohol swabs. And Derek's court-appointed attorney, John Wexler, silver-haired, 18 years on the bench, known around town for being the kind of man who kept things peaceful, mostly by convincing his clients to plead out early and stay quiet. He stopped by the jail on Tuesday, never saw Derek, just signed a few authorization papers, chatted briefly with the court clerk, and left without saying a word to the man he was supposed to defend. In his internal report, he wrote, "Client displayed signs of non-compliance. Recommend passive defense strategy." Meanwhile, Derek knew nothing of any of this. Not the shifting assignments, not the backroom whispers, not the attorney who never looked him in the eye. Time inside cell 6 didn't pass in minutes or hours. It moved in breaths, heavy, uneven ones, and the same three questions that looped like prayer beads. Is Mom still alive? How long will they keep me here? Does anyone believe I didn't do it? Every day he got 15 minutes of yard time on the cement slab out back. No roof, no cover, just sky and cold rain. He never spoke, never begged. Because what was the point? All he'd get were the same looks. People glancing away, afraid of being pulled in, afraid of losing whatever piece they had left. 3 days in, a single slip of paper was added to his case file. One line, "Detainee remains in custody." No special legal counsel requested. Note, prior speeding violation in 2022. Verbal confrontation with law enforcement at June checkpoint. No one asked what that confrontation was. No one noted it happened because Derek had defended another man being falsely arrested for driving the same make of car. But in Garrison, truth only got airtime if it came attached to the right last name. That night, as the light above him flickered again, Derek sat still, hands folded against his forehead. He whispered, not loud enough for the guard, or even himself, to fully hear. It could have been a prayer. It could have been a plea. If there's anyone out there who knows I didn't hurt anyone, please, don't stay silent anymore. Nights in Dallas rarely go still. Even past 11, headlights slid beneath overpasses like ghosts rushing to forget the day behind them. On the 5th floor of a modest apartment complex, Jasmine Crockett sat at her dining table, surrounded by legal files on public land disputes. Her hair hung loose. Reading glasses rested low on the bridge of her nose. Overhead, the ceiling fans spun in steady circles, as if keeping time with her thoughts, round and round, with no end in sight. She had just set her tea down when her phone buzzed. Not from the firm's secure line. It was her personal number, one few people had. Tiana L. "Jazz, it's been a while. I know you're swamped, but something's not right. Garrison, a car crash, a black man's in custody, his mom's in critical. No one's talking. I saw blood, saw cops walk away. Security cameras malfunctioned. It's like they wanted to forget it ever happened. If you still believe in justice, look into it." Jasmine took off her glasses and leaned back. Her face didn't change, but one foot started to bounce slightly. an old habit. It always meant her gut had caught something her head hadn't yet named. Tiana, high school classmate, once got suspended for calling out their gym coach after he said black students were genetically built for defense. Tiana wasn't the type to reach out after midnight unless something was truly wrong. 3 a.m. Jasmine was still at her laptop, the only light in her apartment. She scrolled through local news, court dockets, small-town forums. Nothing. No headlines. No reports. She typed, Derek Miles, criminal record, Georgia. One image popped up. A rain-soaked man, tired eyes, cuffed hands behind his back. Charge, reckless driving, held pending investigation. No mention of the woman in the car. No context. No reason why he was driving that day. By sunrise, Jasmine was at her office in downtown Dallas. She filled out a leave form for 3 days. No explanation. Her supervisor raised an eyebrow. Heading south again? Trouble somewhere? She offered a small smile, a quiet nod. No one I know, but someone who needs someone who won't sit still. 2 days later, Jasmine arrived in Garrison. No announcements, no press. She rented a tiny room near the farmer's market, quiet enough to disappear, close enough to hear the truth before it turned into rumor. She didn't unpack. She grabbed a folder already printed, tucked it under her arm, and walked straight to the county courthouse. She told the clerk she was reviewing records for a pending civil complaint. Just enough of a lie to access the archives. Just enough truth to feel like she was breathing again. From morning till noon, Jasmine sat in the dusty record room, the air thick with old paper and the hiss of a tired air conditioner. One case after another blinked across the screen. Marcus Hill, 17. Popped a wheelie on his bike. No witnesses. 3 months juvenile detention. Sharon Bellamy, single mom, accused of shoplifting. Surveillance footage unavailable due to file corruption. Jameer Cook, 34, rear-ended by another vehicle, convicted for sudden stop causing harm. In the lower right corner of each case, expedited judgment granted upon prosecutorial request. Court assessed high risk of repeat offense. Insufficient grounds for delay. Jasmine closed the file. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. She pulled out her phone, dialed the number Tiana had used. Alma, his mother, is she alive? The voice on the other end was hushed. Still on a ventilator, no insurance on file. They're calling her an unidentified financial responsibility case. And you? Jasmine asked. I haven't been reassigned yet, but they're watching me differently now. Thank you, Jasmine whispered, for saying what no one else would. Tiana exhaled slowly. You once told me, law's not here to silence people. It's here so everyone can be heard. I'm doing my part. The rest is yours. Jasmine didn't answer. She just looked out the window. The clouds were gathering, a soft gray folding over the town like a question. She opened her bag, pulled out a faded folder. On its cover, a worn logo from the Garrison Legal Aid Project, 1998. Her father's old organization, shut down after his death in a highway accident that was never investigated. She stared at that logo, long and still. This time, I'll do it better than you did. From above, the Marigold intersection looked like any other crossroad, just 2 quiet gray streets crossing like threads. But for those who lived nearby, each corner held something unsaid, a memory, a moment, sometimes even a secret. That morning, under a steel-colored sky, Jasmine Crockett stood once again at the scene of the crash. No rain yet, just the kind of air that made you breathe slower. She stopped by the faded white line, where Derek had allegedly made the reckless turn, and let her eyes scan the surroundings. Utility poles, rusted signage, warped fences, porch windows sealed behind curtains that hadn't been drawn in years. She wasn't looking for luck. She was looking for what memory might have left behind. A beige house sat at the northeast corner of the intersection. Roof rusted, wooden fence bleached to gray. On the windowsill, a wilted purple orchid, tilted sideways. Just beside it, fastened to the planter's side, was a small black tube. Jasmine paused, tilted her head. Most would overlook it, but she recognized it instantly. A DIY security cam, one of the older types. No Wi-Fi, no cloud. Just a micro SD card quietly recording hour by hour. She knocked. It took a long minute, but eventually the door cracked open. Hattie Monroe, mid-70s, tiny frame, robe worn thin at the collar. Her eyes were old but not cloudy. Her voice raspy, not from illness, but from too many years of saying things no one cared to hear. "I'm not buying anything," she said, cautious. "I'm not selling," Jasmine replied softly. "I just need to ask you something about that afternoon." She didn't mention a crash, just spoke of a loud bang, a woman taken away, police cars swarming. Hattie blinked, glanced down the street, then opened the door just a little more. "Come in, but make it quick. The ones in uniform don't like me much these days." The house smelled like melted candle wax and yellowing newspaper. On the coffee table sat an open photo album. A framed picture of a laughing brown-skinned boy took center place. "My grandson," Hattie said, "moved out of state now. I send him little videos every evening. He says he misses the way it rains in Garrison." "You filmed them with that?" Jasmine nodded toward the planter. "Yeah, put it up last year. Not very clear, but you can hear the rain. He says it helps him sleep." Jasmine kept her composure, but her pulse was racing now. "That day, do you still have the footage? Sometime between noon and 1? Hattie gave a slow nod, then sighed. "I do. I even put it on a USB. Was going to bring it to the station." "Going to?" Number Y did bring it. The room fell quiet. Hattie poured tea with trembling fingers. I handed it to the officer at the front desk. Gave it straight to him. He didn't write down my name. Didn't ask a thing. "Did anyone follow up?" Jasmine asked gently. I don't think they planned to use it. So I kept the original. Didn't trust them to hold on to the truth." Jasmine reached out and touched Hattie's shoulder. "Would you? Let me see it." The old woman rose without a word. She returned with a small wooden box. Inside, a 64-gigabyte SD card, the kind used in digital cameras. No seal, no evidence label, just one handwritten phrase in blue ink. "Rainy afternoon, Derek." Jasmine slotted it into her laptop. The screen lit up. The footage was grainy. The rain blurred the lens like soft breath on glass. Cars passed occasionally, quiet, unbothered. Then, a Chevy pulls up, stops, just in front of a faded yield sign. Moments later, a white Lexus RX appears from the left. It doesn't slow, doesn't signal, crosses the line, crack, metal on metal, dull and final. Then, a voice, a man shouting. And then, "Mama, what? Don't close your eyes." Jasmine didn't blink. She rewound, paused, zoomed in. Not perfect quality, but clear enough. Derek had stopped. Vincent had charged forward. The footage wasn't flawless, but it was real. The first true thread in a web tangled with lies. "Ms. Hattie," Jasmine whispered, still looking at the screen, "do you realize you just saved someone's life?" Hattie shook her head. "I don't need to know that. I just did my part. The rest, that's yours." Outside, it wasn't raining, but the gray sky above the intersection felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the first crack of thunder to arrive. Jasmine closed the laptop, pressed the USB against her chest, stood up. This time, no one's bearing the truth. 3 days after Jasmine turned in the footage from the flowerpot camera, the Garrison Voice ran a front-page exclusive. Bold headline, "Accident Video Shocks Community. Genuine or edited?" The article quoted William Buckley, the high-profile attorney representing Vincent Haynes, who had, until that point, remained invisible. That morning, Buckley made his debut at a press conference, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, deep red tie, and a smile just polished enough to seem polite, but cold enough to keep people cautious. "We've submitted the video for analysis by an independent digital forensics consultant. Preliminary findings suggest irregular frame timing and light jumps at timestamp 132. This raises serious questions about the integrity of the footage submitted by Attorney Crockett." The public's breath caught in its throat. Local social media, initially swaying toward Derek, especially after rumors about his mother and biased policing, began to splinter. Some posted, "If the clip's doctored, how do we know what really happened? I want to believe Jasmine, but now I'm not so sure." But through the noise, a few voices held steady, like threadbare ropes clutched in a storm. "I saw them arrest my son once for a missing taillight. I know people like Jasmine don't make stuff up. Even if the video's glitchy, what about his mom's blood? What about the police report? Did anyone ask her how she's doing?" Jasmine got the news in the waiting room at the hospital. Alma was still on a ventilator, her face pale, eyelids closed, like paper no one dared to write on. A young nurse, black and soft-spoken, touched Jasmine's shoulder. "I'm not allowed to talk about the case, but I've seen him. Derek used to come into the diner by the school. One time, he paid for an old man's breakfast when he came up short. I don't know about frame rates or edits, but that man didn't seem cruel." Jasmine didn't respond. She just took Alma's hand, still warm, still human. "They're not going to steal his voice," she whispered. "Not while I'm still here." That night, Buckley went live again, this time on Garrison's local television station. He leaned further in. "We want justice too, but justice relies on legitimate evidence. A clip from a private camera, without verified origin or chain of custody, should that be enough to override due process?" He dodged every question about Vincent, spoke only in collective pronouns. "We, our legal team, the analysts." Never once said, "I represent Vincent Haynes." But Jasmine knew. That night she reopened Buckley's background, not through court transcripts, but through the State Bar's legal ethics archive. It took 5 minutes, enough to send a chill through her entire body. Buckley was currently serving as legal advisor to TriPoint Assurance, the very insurance company that would be forced to pay out millions if Vincent were found at fault, which meant if Vincent lost, TriPoint paid. If Vincent walked free, TriPoint kept its money. And Buckley stood in both worlds: defender, advisor, profiteer. Jasmine stared at the screen, not in shock, but in confirmation. She had suspected it all along. Now it was undeniable. A man who didn't just sell his voice, he hired people to crush every other voice around him. The next morning, she didn't call a press conference. She didn't write a thread on Twitter. She drafted a confidential memo, sent it straight to the Georgia State Bar Ethics Committee. Subject line: "Undisclosed conflict of interest, William Buckley, TriPoint and the Derek Miles case." Then she typed a message, not to a news anchor, not to a colleague. She sent one line to the person who first broke the silence, to Tiana. "The truth is losing its patience, and I've never been one to wait." In Garrison, they didn't kill justice with guns or batons. They did it with locked drawers, with files marked pending, with quiet nods from powerful people too busy to care. After Jasmine filed her emergency motion, along with Buckley's conflict documentation, she received no rejection, but also no reply, just silence. 3 days passed. She called the county judicial office. "Your filing is under review. The case has been routed through a special process due to third-party involvement. Please be patient while it's evaluated." Special process? No one explained what that meant, but Jasmine knew. That was Garrison's version of the bottom drawer. The court never reopened the case, not by decree, just by doing nothing. When Jasmine showed up in person to ask about the delay, she was stopped at the reception desk. The clerk didn't make eye contact, kept typing. "I know you're doing the right thing, Ms. Crockett, but around here, being right doesn't count unless someone lets you be." She left with a stack of evidence and a hollowness in her chest, like someone had quietly siphoned the air out of her lungs. Meanwhile, in cell 6, Derek stopped speaking. No more questions about trial, no mention of his lawyer, no "how's my mom?" Just silence, eyes fixed on a brown water stain on the ceiling, like he was trying to read a message that only the forgotten ever understand. A guard once said, "He's quiet, doesn't cause trouble, but his eyes, there's nothing burning in them, nothing drowning either, just dry, like a well that's gone empty." Back at the hospital, Alma's vitals dipped lower every hour. 4 bags replaced constantly. 3 billing notices had been issued, But no one had claimed financial responsibility. Her insurance was denied, filed as inactive due to income verification lapse. Jasmine asked the doctor, "What happens if no one steps up?" "We'll keep her under emergency care for 72 more hours. After that, she may be transferred to long-term maintenance, or depending on state protocol, we may withdraw life support." That night, Jasmine sat alone in the hospital corridor. She didn't check her phone, didn't look up, and for the first time in all her years as a lawyer, she felt just like her clients, unseen, uncalled, unanswered. A hashtag appeared that evening. Justice for Derek, not trending, not viral, just fragments of grief from people who'd once been left behind too. "My son got locked up 3 weeks for purse theft. Turns out they had the wrong car. I saw Vincent drunk in a parking lot after a board meeting once. No one said a word. Folks were scared to lose their jobs." Garrison's silence ain't about ignorance. It's about fear. Speak up, and they label you disturbing the peace. Jasmine read every line. She didn't cry, but under her skin, something throbbed, veins drawn tight with rage like a storm building behind her sternum. The next morning she returned to the jail. Derek waited in the visitation room. Same stare, same rain-stained shirt. Jasmine said nothing about new motions, made no promises. She just sat across from him, hands flat against the cold table. "Derek, I don't have good news today, but I have a question. If your mom wakes up tomorrow and learns you stayed silent to protect her, do you think she'll be proud of you? Or will she ask why you didn't fight?" He didn't speak, but for the first time in days he bowed his head. Not in shame, not in prayer, but like someone finally letting go of the weight of submission, because someone had just reminded him, silence is not a form of love. Jasmine stood, still holding the motion that had been ignored. But this time, she didn't file it through the system. She hand-delivered it to the one person left in Georgia who might still tilt the balance, a retired Superior Court judge, pushed out of the local investment board 5 years ago for refusing to endorse Vincent Haynes's rezoning project. A man who still owed Jasmine's father one final explanation. Monday morning, at the Herald Review, an anonymous email landed in the inbox labeled, "Tell us what you can't say anywhere else." Subject line, "They paid him." Attached was a single PDF, exported from Tri-Point Assurance's internal system, the insurance company defending Vincent Haynes. Inside was a meeting memo. Under budget item, strategic legal response, section 3, 2B, payment, $40,000. William Buckley. Note, media control related to Garrison case, Crockett clip. Do not disclose. Do not log to standard archive. At the bottom, one red line. Store only on backup server. Do not transfer to SharePoint. The editorial room fell silent. No more typing, no more chatter. Just glances across the table. Enough to know something had cracked open. By noon, email blood trended locally. National outlets dug in. Old exposés on Buckley resurfaced. And with them, his deep financial ties to Tri-Point's legal board. Jasmine got the news inside a hospital elevator. She hadn't even stepped out when a young nurse grabbed her arm. "They're talking about you on the noon news. People, they're starting to believe." Jasmine didn't check the screen. She just pulled out her phone and made a call. Calm voice, no tremor. "Hi, I need independent verification on the original crash footage from a lab outside the state of Georgia." 3 days later, the Pittsburgh Institute of Visual Science and Data sent back a report. Upon review of frame-by-frame metadata and raw card data, no signs of tampering were detected. Light flicker and time lag consistent with CMOS sensor error, typical of older equipment. Conclusion: video is authentic and unedited. Under public pressure and demands from more than 20 civil justice organizations, the Garrison Court was forced to reopen the case. An internal review began. The Garrison police chief, who'd misplaced the USB from Ms. Hattie, was placed on administrative leave. The district prosecutor's office launched a formal audit of 18 prior cases involving William Buckley. At the emergency hearing, even the courthouse clerk, the same one who'd blocked Jasmine weeks before, was called to testify. Why wasn't the urgent motion processed? She lowered her gaze. I was instructed by Judge Bell's office that the filing lacked practical merit and could disrupt internal order. A new picture began to form. This wasn't just about Derek. It was about a system engineered to overlook what it didn't want to see. That night, Jasmine returned to her rented room, opened a blank page. At the top, she began writing, Declaration in Defense of Evidence, Garrison Retrial, Day 17. Her pen scratched the paper slowly, not with ink, but with the weight of every time truth had been delayed. Derek's retrial lasted less than 2 hours. The evidence was presented again, this time with 3 separate authentication letters. The USB footage from Miss Hattie was played in full. The police chief declined to testify. William Buckley was unavailable due to health reasons. The new judge, once sidelined for being too lenient on civil disputes, read the decision aloud. Derek Miles had no legal basis for detention. In light of new, verified material, this court orders all charges vacated. Immediate release. No applause, no gasps. Just silence. Long and deep, like a bottle finally uncorked after being sealed with fear for too long. That afternoon, Derek walked out of the county jail. No escort, no cameras. Just Jasmine, leaning quietly against a dented rental car, arms crossed. Her eyes didn't ask, "Are you okay?" They asked something else entirely. "Do you still believe in yourself?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he bent down to tie his shoes, the ones he hadn't been able to reach for weeks because shackles don't allow for small, human movements. Then he stood up. His gaze held no hate, but it no longer sparkled. It carried a kind of tiredness only those silenced long enough can understand. "Thanks for not giving up." "I didn't save you," Jasmine replied. "The truth did. I just didn't let it go unheard." That evening, Derek didn't go home. He asked Jasmine to take him somewhere first, the hospital. Alma's room hadn't changed. Same blinking monitors, same sterile air. But this time, the door was open. Derek stepped in quietly. No one heard his shoes hit the tile. He sat by her bed, took her frail hand into his own. "Mom, it's me. I didn't do anything wrong, and they finally know." There was no reply, but slowly, so slowly, a single tear rolled from the corner of her eye, like her body had held it in, through coma and confusion, just waiting for a moment worth weeping for. In the hallway, Jasmine leaned against the wall, watching through the glass. She didn't enter, didn't interrupt. She knew this moment didn't belong to the law, or any courtroom. This was redemption not from a system, but from life itself. At the corner of Marigold and Fifth, the site of the crash, a new camera had been mounted on a tall lamppost. For the first time in years, Garrison had an eye that didn't know how to look away. Derek Miles sat alone beneath that pole, a folded sheet of paper in his hands. He opened it. Read the words one more time, then refolded it and placed it beneath the lamppost, right where the light didn't quite reach. The note read, "If there's anyone who's ever been accused without question, judged without being heard, I hope they know someone else has been there and made it through." He stood, didn't look back. The soft rain had started again, drizzling gently over the paper, spreading the ink like breath on a mirror. Not gone, but fading. They say rainwater evaporates, that events, even the loudest ones, eventually slip into memory. People will return to their routines. The shops will reopen. The headlines will move on. But somewhere, for someone, the fall still lives on, etched into skin, pressed into palms, invisible to the eye, but every time it meets the light, it stings. And this story may end on radio broadcasts, in newspapers, and inside old court records. But for those who've ever been swallowed by silence, it doesn't end. Because justice is never a destination, it is a road. And every awakened step we take upon it matters.